Hello, this is Kurt Francom, and many of you know me as the host of the Leading Saints podcast. But Leading Saints isn't just a podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we strive to create quality leadership content for Latter-day Saints in order to help them be better prepared to lead. With this mission comes a lot of expense, and we need additional help to continue our efforts in the coming year. In order to exchange value for value, we have created the Core Leader community. To become a core leader, all you have to do is become a subscribing donor, which might be a monthly recurring donation or even a quarterly or yearly donation. For those who become a core leader through a subscription donation, you have access to our core leader library, which includes additional recorded interviews not available to the general audience, access to all virtual summits, discounts on products and conferences, and access to a private Corecast feed where you will hear additional leadership thought and behind-the-scenes happenings. We are a community of leaders making this happen, and we need you a part of this mission. Text the word LEAD to 474747 in order to become a core leader today, or visit leadingsaints.org/donate. And we're back to the Leading Saints podcast. My name is Kurt Francom, and I will be your host. Now, if you're not familiar with Leading Saints, I'm glad that you somehow made your way here, but we are a nonprofit organization with the mission of helping Latter-day Saints be better prepared to lead. And one way we do that is through this podcast, and there's 370, I don't know, I've lost count, episodes, almost have 2.5 million downloads. I mean, we're really making some strides here, and I hope that you'll add a few more downloads to that pile by exploring the content. There's so many valuable interviews that I hope will enrich your life, but also enrich your leadership experience. So definitely check that out. You can also go to leadingsaints.org and see thousands of articles there and join the newsletter and check out the summits. And I mean, there's so much content that we've put together to hopefully help Latter-day Saints be better prepared to lead. And this episode will definitely do that. It was such a fun episode to record as I invited Quinn Kelly, Bailey Savage, and Deb Hutchins into my home studio here to record. Deb was actually called in remotely from Twin Falls, Idaho, and but nonetheless, we captured her experience as well. But these are three women who experience same-sex attraction, and they talk about their developmental years in the church, being raised with this experience and that identity, and how they reconciled it with the gospel, and how they're doing that now, and just so many perspectives. And really, we took it from what could you teach leaders, what could you help leaders with to help them be better prepared to minister to those women in their ward who experience same-sex attraction. And some of their perspectives and points and principles they shared were so valuable. And I know that you'll definitely enjoy them. And this is all in conjunction with the North Star Conference that's coming up. And just like I talked about in the past, I can't express enough how much leaders need to be involved in this conference. So if you are in a reasonable traveling distance from Salt Lake City, on March 5th through the 7th, they are holding the North Star Conference, which they do every year, which is so valuable. And North Star is a third-party nonprofit organization from the church, but they help build and stimulate community among the LGBT community of Latter-day Saints who are striving to maintain their covenants and have an enriching experience in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they do a phenomenal job at just that. And one of the ways they do that is through the conference. Now, on the 7th, that Saturday, is actually the most important day for leaders to understand and know about, because they put on free leadership sessions. So anybody that sits on a ward council and their counselors or whatever, they can go to northstar.com and register for this conference and go to those leadership sessions. It should be something that you go to every year. I promise you, it will sustain you in your ministering efforts with the LGBT Latter-day Saints. It is so, so valuable. So I'll put all the links of that in the show notes and talk about it more at the end of the episode, but this one is worth a listen, so you're going to enjoy it. So here's my interview with Quinn Kelly, Bailey Savage, and Deb Hutchins. Today I find myself in our home studio here with three fantastic ladies. I guess one of them is not physically here with us, but with Quinn Kelly, Bailey Savage, and Deb Hutchins. Did I say your names right?
Yeah, that's right.
Good. Well, welcome. And you can hear us up there in Idaho. Is that right, Deb?
Yep, I can hear you.
Good. Awesome. So I want to ask you to do the impossible. And let me set it up a little bit different. As we've gone, year to year, as we've been more and more involved with North Star and the good mission that they have, I've always tried to promote their conference that they have every year. And we do that through talking about topics related to same-sex attraction, about that experience in the context of being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so we have, I've interviewed all sorts of different people from different angles of this topic. And a few people have emailed me and said, hey, we would love to hear an interview where you interview women who experience same-sex attraction and their experience in being a Latter-day Saint and serving in the church and the day-to-day, week-to-week experience of those types of Latter-day Saints. So I thought, great, let's find those women and bring them in the studio and have a conversation. That's what's led us here. So now is where I'm going to ask you to do the impossible. That is, tell your story in 5 minutes or less. Okay, roughly speaking. I know, obviously, your story is much more in depth and personal that way. So, Quinn, why don't we start with you?
Sure.
Where do we begin to understand your story and put you into context here?
Sure. Thanks. I grew up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My parents were converts when I was a baby. So again, essentially, I grew up a member. And I grew up in the 80s, which was a time when there wasn't a very significant dialogue surrounding LGBT issues, a very pervasive dialogue. And so it wasn't something that I thought about. And that was coupled with going to church each week and attending Young Women's and hearing the same message that you'll grow up, you'll get married, in the temple, you'll have kids. And so those two things, growing up in the 80s coupled with this message that I heard each week, made it so the thought never occurred to me that I could experience same-sex attraction. Mm. And it might sound funny to someone today in 2020, but I can tell you the thought didn't occur to me.
And this was before you even recognized maybe some of these feelings, or?
Right, right. I didn't recognize the feelings and didn't think that there was any reason for me to experience this. It wasn't until my early 20s when the thought occurred to me for the first time, I might experience same-gender attraction, but this was around the year 2001, 2002, so still quite some time ago. Another 12, 13 years passed, and I'd call it like pressure mounting up like a dam, water in a dam. Mm-hmm. And I could no longer deny those feelings. And so this was about 5 years ago when I, one morning, just woke up and said, I think I'm gay. I think I experienced same-sex attraction. And after talking to a lot of people, I believe that we've had similar experiences in that admitting it to yourself is almost as difficult as coming out to other people. And that was about 5 years ago. And that was a hard step for me. Mm. But I acknowledged those feelings. I came out to select family and friends and began the process of reconciling my faith with my attractions and my feelings. And that's been about a 5-year process for me. And like many people you'll talk to that are reconciling faith and attraction, it's been a difficult process. It's been hard. There's been moments that are filled with frustration and sadness and depression, but there's also been very sweet and tender moments from God. Wow. And that's my experience in a nutshell.
Awesome. Deb, let's go to you next. Tell us your story.
All right. I would say, it's hard to start, like where to begin. I grew up in St. George in a big family member for my whole life. And in high school, I know I had crushes on my friends, but I was too afraid of that possibly meaning that I was gay. So I would kind of cover it up as, oh, this is charity. And that's really how I buried it for the next 4 years or so. Then I went on my mission. And at some point towards the beginning, I realized, these thoughts that I'm having, these are definitely not normal. There's just no way else to explain it. And that's when I came out to myself, which was very difficult. And a mission is a hard place to get the emotional support, or it was. I think it's improving, and that the communication with families is great. And it was there on my mission that came out to one of my companions for the first time coming out to anybody. And that was emotionally traumatic for me. Eventually ended up acting on those feelings with that same companion later. And then later told my mission president and came home early from my mission by a few months. And that was a time that was just really intense. And I had to do a lot of personal seeking of what do I want to do? How do I feel about myself? How am I going to move forward in the church and at BYU, and reconnecting with friends from before my mission. So it was just a really big transition state in my life. Thankfully, I had a few really good friends that were just very understanding and supportive. And they are people who carried me through the hardest part of it. Gradually, I came out to more friends, my family. I got connected to BYU I was a student at BYU, and I got connected to a group of administrators and students who were working on making BYU campus a better place for LGBT individuals. And we met once or twice a week for a few hours every week for about a year. And that is where I got to meet other LGBT students. And they selected these students. There were probably only about 10 students and 10 administrators. And they were selected because it was a variety of opinions and experiences. And so it naturally just brought up a lot of friction, but it also taught me so much and learned to love these people so much, and just being in that close group where we met so often. And that really gave me more confidence being myself, and also being confident to share my story more. So before this group, I was pretty closeted. I just had told a few friends, but then being a part of this group at BYU and having the support, then I could share my story more. And eventually I was on a BYU Instagram story about respect and the honor code representing LGBT students. I did a Voices of Hope. That's a recording, like an interview of my story and my experience. And that was posted, and I shared that on my personal Facebook page. And that was a big deal. And I even spoke at women's conference at BYU, and representing being LGBT in the church. And those were all just big things that I wouldn't have seen myself doing years before without the support of friends who are gay and other friends who are straight as well. And I have just really grown from that kind of support of other people, and just knowing that they're there for me. So that's kind of where I'm at now. It's been going from being really, really scared to just being a lot more confident and sure of myself. But honestly, like, I still find myself trying to go back into the closet sometimes. And moving to a new city, I'm moving around every 6 months now, and okay, what am I going to do now? So it's not that I am perfectly confident and just so open, but it's nice being able to see the progression. So that's a little bit of my story.
Yeah. Interesting, because it's almost like that coming out experience never really ends, right? Because you move, or especially in the ward or in the church, you go to different wards and you sort of have to come out once again, and that can be such a difficult process to go over.
And trying to do it in a way that is less ritualistic or less dramatic and more normal. It's kind of fun sometimes. I've had a friend ask, "Oh, Deb, are you going on what is it? Like, are you dating anybody?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." It's kind of tricky because I'm gay, so I don't.
Yeah. But and to some people,
just trying to be more normal and bring it up in a normal conversation.
Yeah. Right. And we're going to talk more about that concept. But so I want to go back to you coming home from your mission. So was it a type of thing that, because I know that can be a very traumatic experience and, shaming in some experience. Did you come home feeling like, did you feel like you're in trouble and you're being sent home, and, that can really impact your self-worth? Or was it difficult to maintain your connection to the church experience?
There was definitely a lot of shame, but it was almost entirely internally created, the shame. And I remember being so worried once I knew that I would be sent home, like, "Oh, okay, you're going to go home in like 4 days from now." Just the fear of like, what is everyone else going to think about me or say, or how am I going to be accepted or rejected? Because months earlier in my mission, I had like the stigma of the thought that if there was an early return missionary, not for emotional or physical reasons, then like, that's terrible. That's just absolutely terrible. How horrific. And then I was that person. So there's a lot of humility and a lot of understanding. I think really there's a huge blessing of just like being humbled and being more understanding, and just realizing like people have challenges, and maybe they aren't the same challenges as yours. What you think is hard might be easy to them, and what you think is easy might be super hard to them. And so that opened up a lot of understanding there. But yeah, coming home, I was surprised just how well received I was. I didn't feel like people were rejecting me. Most people, because I went on a mission during the time where it was like the flood of age change missionaries. And so there were just a ton of missionaries going out. And then when I was coming back home, like a ton of missionaries coming back home. And so because I came home only 3 months early, a lot of people didn't even realize I came home early because it's just like, oh yeah, you're a missionary coming back during this time, just like everybody else. Or I had broke my foot on my mission a few weeks earlier, and people were like, oh, did you come home early because of your foot? And it had healed by then. So, but there was just internally, it was really difficult. I was very worried about I was so worried of making new friends who were women. I was so scared of even just like making any physical contact at all with friends. And it took some good therapy, just a few sessions of good therapy. And then a couple of really solid friends that just, they could love me even when I couldn't love myself for a few months, and getting to a point where just getting some fresh air and a new perspective and just ready to move forward.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely going to touch more on that. And I also, as we go through this, Deb, feel free. I'm just intrigued by that transition, because obviously you weren't the first to go through something like that. You won't be the last. And so I think maybe learning more about your perspective as far as what leaders could have done or did do, or all that in that process, that'd be great to touch on. So Bailey, let's recap your story.
Okay. So I grew up in the church and was always like a tomboy into sports, and didn't realize until my senior year of high school that I was attracted to women, and it terrified me. I was like, this can't be a thing. Like, this doesn't work. Like, there's something wrong with me. And I was so scared I couldn't hold it in. So I kind of figured out who might be safe to talk to. And my volleyball coach turned out to be a really good resource. She was also a counselor at my school. So I told her, like, I'm afraid that I might be lesbian. And she said, there's nothing wrong with you. And I was like, just the most reassuring thing, because I felt like there was. But yeah, she was super loving. And she did ask, like, well, what does your church teacher think about that? And I was like, it's not okay. But she said, you are okay. And I really needed that, because I spent a lot of years after that kind of like in denial. Like, no, I just really love my friends. Or
it was a phase, right?
Yeah, it's a phase. I'm a late bloomer, but it just kept coming up, and I kept hating myself for it. It's like, oh man, I'm falling for another friend. Like, I can't do this. This is not allowed. This is not going to work. This is not in the plan. And yeah, just that conflict was really difficult. I did have some really good friends and bishops at BYU that were willing to listen to me. And it meant a lot to have them love me when I couldn't love myself. Like they helped me to believe that it was possible that, oh, you know this about me and you still care? Like, maybe I could love me. Maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started seeing a counselor and working with these bishops, and they were good listeners. I also had some friends that were good at listening, and that meant a lot. I always wanted to serve a mission, and I was able to serve in Nebraska, which was awesome. I had
that's great
mission president and companions, and it was so wonderful. Like, I loved being able to share my testimony, because I felt like this whole struggle had helped me come closer to God. And I wanted to share with people, like, yeah, Christ really can cleanse and forgive and heal and change our hearts. And it was great to be able to share that. And I was terrified to come home, though. I was like, I do not want to get back into that dating world. That is going to be awful. And when I did get home, I moved in with some mission friends, and they're like, oh, you should date Jared Savage, who's in the ward. And I was like, I got home a week ago. You all need to calm down. Like, I don't even think so. And they didn't know that I was attracted to women, but I did want an eternal family. Like, that's always been something that's really important to me, like one of those deep desires of my heart. So I was like, well, I gotta date guys then if I'm gonna, raise a family in the gospel and be a mom like I always dreamed. So I started dating Jared, and he was a really nice guy. And I think God knew this was going to be hard for me. So he gave me reassurances all along the way. Like, he's really good. His family's really good. And not just he's good, but he's good for you.
Wow.
And so just all along the way as we're dating, it was like, yep, this could work. As crazy as it would be, this could actually work. And my bishop at the time counseled me to tell Jared that I was attracted to women. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. So I did and gave him some time, like, take it or leave it. Whatever you're comfortable with, great. And he thought about it and came back to me and was like, I like the direction you're going in. It's the direction I want to go. So let's go in it together. So we got engaged. We felt, like marriage is the right thing for us and God's going to help us make it work. And he has. It's been amazing, really, to see how my love for Jared has grown and how, the Lord's just been helping us all along the way. There have certainly been hard times, especially when I experienced some postpartum depression. And that's when I actually found North Star and got some support and community there. And I wasn't able to kind of put it on a shelf anymore because for the first few years of our marriage, it wasn't really discussed. Maybe a little bit here and there, or if I did have feelings, I just brush them aside. But with the depression, it just fell off and scattered everywhere. And now we got to pick up the pieces and okay, we can't put it back up. So how can we incorporate this into our life?
Yeah.
And it's been a process, but it's been so good because I've even just recently come to the realization that this gayness is actually a gift from God that he's given me so that I can bless others.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And it's very liberating.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned you had a great mission president and that sounds like that mission was a very positive experience. So were you upfront with your mission president about these feelings from the beginning or?
So I didn't tell him in the first interview, but pretty quickly, within the first few weeks, it was I should tell him I can't handle this on my own. I need somebody to talk to.
And I imagine that was helpful that every time you had that interview with your president, he was aware of that and you just knew that I'm in a safe place. And it goes back to those safe places just from that volleyball coach, even knowing that you're walking into a conversation with someone who's safe, that's very encouraging and it gives you more and more hope, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. He was incredible.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Those, again, you all deserve your own podcast episode because those stories are so intriguing and we'll hopefully touch on them more as we go through this. But let's talk about something that was mentioned before we recorded that sometimes I think about these things we don't even need to talk about that because that's so old fashioned and Deb brought it up. And so I want to make sure we tackle this hard and get it out of the way. But Deb, and we'll start with you just as far as this concept of even the church has a pretty clear stance that we don't believe that this is a choice, that at some point you decide, I'm going to go this way, and again, that doesn't make sense in a lot of ways. But Deb, how would you articulate that? Why would it be important to reemphasize that this feeling of same-sex attraction is not a choice?
I think if someone assumes it's a choice, it's kind of taking away the fact of and the reality of the challenge of the situation. And so I think that's what hurts so much is just feeling such a huge gap of not feeling understood. And that's what we desire as people. And so if you the view or the perspective of thinking being gay is a choice, you choose to go off with someone of your same sex because you just decided that was cool or the thing that day. That's just not how it is. So I just think this needs to be said that it's not a choice. And as you said, the church recognizes that as well. And maybe teachings decades ago were different, but we're a church continuing in light and understanding. And we understand more now that it's a complex reality, as Russell and Ballard has shared. Yeah. So it's really simple.
Yeah. It's simple, right? We're taking a strong position that we all believe this is not a choice. And I love how Bailey emphasized that really you see it. It's a gift, right? And it's a beautiful gift and it can be a gift that leads you to Christ, right?
Yeah. It's been a long time coming to be able to see it that way.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yeah. Just recognizing that there's a biological basis to it helped me to start to accept it. And that my brain is just wired to bond with women and I should use that to bless their lives.
Yeah. And I can see that from a leadership standpoint, somebody coming in to, the quote unquote, the bishop's office, right? Or some coming out where if you're in the state of mind of oh boy, this is one, obviously, if you think it's a choice, there's a lot more work for you there. But even if you're okay, this is a trial, even if you're in that, it's not as helpful. But when you say oh, this is a gift, this person is coming to my office to share with me something they've been blessed with and a blessing that'll lead them, that can lead them closer to Christ, right? And that I think it puts everybody in a state of mind that's going to help things progress to a healthy place rather than think, okay, this is a burden we need to overcome or things like that, right?
A problem that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, or something that needs to be fixed, right? Quinn, anything we're missing there? Is that we're clear? All right. We're clear on that point. So, Deb, I want to go back to something you mentioned. You early on when you were sort of reconciling this identity with yourself, that you thought maybe it was charity. And this is interesting because I've talked with a room full of men who experience same-sex attraction, and I know even in my relationship with my wife, like her experience of attraction is different than my experience of attraction, right? And so I think it's easy to say, oh, well, you're all in this group, right? You all experience same-sex attraction, but I would imagine it manifests itself differently. Where I would imagine a lot of men, and I don't mean to generalize, but a lot of men who experience same-sex attraction, it's maybe more of a physical attraction, or men are maybe wired that way. I'm getting myself into muddy waters here, but for you, Deb, you kind of said, well, maybe I just really love people a lot, so maybe I'm charitable. Is that how you would articulate it?
Yeah, and mostly in high school, on my first few years of college, that's kind of the perspective that I had. And I think going back to what Bailey was talking about with gifts, that there are natural gifts. And so I do believe, even if my attraction isn't charity, like I can realize that now, I think it opens up the door of feeling charity more easily. It's almost like the door's open. I just have to go through it. It's a lot easier to love people. And then it also helps me reach out to people that are harder to love, that I don't naturally love, but I have this natural practice and ability to care deeply about people and to be willing to serve other people. So yeah, I don't have the male experience of same-sex attraction, so I couldn't say if it is how exactly different it is, or the similarities. And I know there are similarities, and there's just going to be differences as well. But yeah, it was confusing, and it was an easy way to try to cover it up in my own mind at that age.
Yeah.
And again, we may be venturing in dangerous waters here, trying to compare it to what the men experience. But anything else that you would say that maybe some people get wrong as far as what you are experiencing with same-sex attraction, that they assume it's strictly sexual, right? And
anything else that you add
along those lines?
Yeah, there's so much to attraction. It's the idea of caring for somebody, or wanting to be with them, or spending time with them, or seeing the good in other people. There's just so many different aspects of attraction beyond sexual. And yeah, it's more complex than just sexual attraction.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the other thing, is that there are so many ways that can be expressed attraction in an appropriate way without crossing a boundary of any kind, that is actually really nice and other people appreciate, and being able to compliment freely and to see the good and be supportive.
Yeah, and maybe that helps us dovetail into this conversation of as far as the importance of connection with other women in your experience. Because you may think like, okay, I recognize that this is part of who I am. I'm attracted to the same sex, so I need to somehow get involved with a men's poker night or something, because then I'm not around women. Right? That would be ridiculous, right? So, but you've all have recognized that actually connecting with women through, and the church is a great place to do that, has really benefited your faith and your stability as a person. Did you bring this up, Quinn? What are your thoughts on that as far as connecting with other women?
I think something that I would want my leaders to understand, and all church leaders to understand, is that anyone who experiences same-sex attraction, if we're going to church, we're likely going to church for the same reasons that they are.
Right.
And that's to feel the Spirit, to partake of the sacrament, to keep covenants. And furthermore, there's a social aspect to that, just like there is for a majority of the ward members. President Hinckley said we all need a friend, a responsibility, and the nurturing word of God. Mm-hmm. And I think that's even more important for those who are experiencing same-sex attraction, that we can go to a safe space and worship with other women who have the same goals that we do, have the same beliefs that we do, and are on the same covenant-keeping path that we are, and that we can form those connections. And that's an important part for me in filling that hole in my heart. And so I don't want a leader to think that I'm at church to find someone to date.
Right.
Or to make those type of connections. I'm there for the same reason you are. And it's so important to form those friendships. And this is one place where I can go to get that support.
Yeah. And I can see like that scenario could happen where a bishop, maybe you come out to a bishop, and then he may give a heads up to the Relief Society president, hey, just make sure that, no silly business is going on and they're not connecting too deeply with other women. But in reality, just like Deb's experience, like 90% of what she described of this attraction is completely legal, right? Like connecting with women, spending time with them, caring for one another, right? Obviously, there's some clear lines there that shouldn't be crossed, but not to discourage that just because maybe your brain is wired more in this way than not, right? Yeah. Anything we're missing with that as far as connecting with women at church and in society or
something?
Got it.
With that, as Quinn had talked about, like the reason of going to church and having it be so similar, I agree. And as I was pondering and preparing for this interview, I was thinking of what respect I have for any LGBT individual who is connected at all with the church, that the reason that they're connected has to have some deep testimony to it. So for even our friends that end up leaving the church, or maybe just coming every once in a while, or even just reading some scriptures sometimes by themselves, not at church, that they have such a deep testimony of something. And I just really admire that and respect that if you don't go because it's easy, you go because there's something important that you find there through Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Awesome. And I can just imagine like a leader, again, approaching this as it's a gift, right? Coming out to a leader and that leader coming back at you with, oh, this is a gift. This is beautiful. In fact, I need you to use this gift in Relief Society, right? This supercharges you to be a charitable sister, to be loving and connecting. And so lean into that, right? And that can be a message of, oh, wait, you mean I'm not broken? I'm actually enhanced somehow. This is great, and it can be a hopeful message for sure. And then maybe as far as, I think, Bailey, you mentioned this before we hit record, as far as letting us serve, right? I think a lot of people think, again, maybe that naive leader would think, okay, let's kind of put them in this box here and sure, come to church. Yeah, but let's not give you any influence here because, we don't want this getting out or out of control. But what's your thoughts on that, Bailey, as far as letting you serve? And maybe what are some examples that you've heard that maybe this has discouraged leaders from letting them serve?
I don't actually have a whole ton of negative examples because I've been blessed with amazing bishops and other church leaders who have let me serve, and it's been amazing. My current bishop has made it really safe for me to start coming out because I feel like that's where I'm ready. Like I was in Young Women's and I felt like in this one lesson, oh, I should actually share at least a little bit of my story as it relates to the lesson. And so I went and talked to him and I'm like, are we okay with this? Like, because I need you to have my back.
Yeah, right. That's crucial.
And he was like, yeah, I actually think that would be awesome and really helpful for you to share that with them. And I was like, okay, great. And then he happened to be in the lesson with me when I did. And I was so scared. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I'd never come out like to a group before. And I was shaking and I waited until like the last 5 minutes of class. But then I did. I just let them know like, hey, this is part of my experience and how it helped me gain my testimony. And Bishop was like, and isn't she adorable? Like he just is always overflowing with compliments and expressing love for me and letting me know and letting everybody else know that this is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful. Quinn, how have you served?
Right. I've had many callings from in the Young Women's to the Relief Society to most recently Gospel Doctrine teacher. And I think it's important to note that in terms of serving, and again, this might be an outdated idea, but simply because I'm gay or because I experience these attractions doesn't mean that I can't serve with the Relief Society. Yeah. Doesn't mean that I can't serve with the youth.
Right.
And maybe that is an outdated idea, but I think it's still important to note because there are leaders that could feel that way. And we certainly shouldn't be excluded and we should be included like Bailey's experience.
Yeah. And it's almost like subconscious exclusion a little bit. Like, I don't think any leader is mentally thinking, okay, because they experience this, we're not going to let them have these 4 callings. But just like throughout the natural conversation, as you discuss names for callings, like just check yourself, make sure you're not automatically leaving some of these names out. Right. And that can be where maybe some of the damage comes from. So you mentioned as far as like leaders, it was important that the leader had your back, Bailey. I love that. Like any other examples of like, you mentioned just in the context of a class, like when you opening up about this, and we're going to talk about coming out in this, especially like in Deb's scenario where she moves a lot in different wards and has to go through this again and again. But What are some other examples of how leaders could really have your back in this experience?
Well, for those who are not out, I think it's important for leaders to somehow make it known that they're available and willing to talk about hard things, including LGBT experience. Just so that like anybody that is scared and doesn't want to come out or doesn't feel like they have anybody they can talk to, if that leader had just like maybe mentioned one time some friend that they have, or, you know, they would let that scared little soul know that, oh, that's a safe person I can talk to.
Mm-hmm. So kind of use you as a resource. I mean, that's one way that leader would show confidence in you, saying, this is person's a resource. Talk to Bailey because she gets it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I mean, I think that's a strong message. So now I want to talk about this concept of coming out, because we've seen some examples. Sometimes the media gets a hold of it, or Facebook, you know, gets shared again, of people maybe coming out in sacrament meeting, during fast and testimony meeting, or, you know, some of these more public settings. And it's one of these things that's like, okay, like maybe don't do it that way, but it still has to happen some way, right? Like, what are your thoughts as far as like, how would you, or some people say, I don't need to come out, you know, as with this thing I deal with or that thing I deal with. So why do you have to come out with this thing? But it is, from what I understand, it is important in that healing process and in that spiritual development, right? So what do we need to understand about this concept of coming out that's so crucial?
I think it's important to recognize everybody needs to do it in their own time and in their own way.
Yeah.
So for me personally, to this point, it's been more like one-on-one as I, you know, connect with my ministering sisters or whoever, like, oh yeah, this is part of my experience, and just like gradually making it known in an individual one-by-one basis. Yeah.
And now it's you coming out on a podcast as well.
So yeah, now I get to share it with the whole world if I want.
Yeah. Deb, what about you as far as, you know, you talk about this concept of like the first time it feels more like this event, right? I sat my parents down, or I sat my friends down, and I told them this thing, right? But now, you know, after you've had that big moment, just like Deb, your experience, I mean, this is sort of a day-to-day, week-to-week thing that you sort of have to work it into natural conversations without being like, all right, this is a big thing I'm about to tell you, right? Any thoughts that would be helpful from you, Deb?
Yeah, well, and what you had said earlier about coming out at church is just like, well, people don't have to come out either. You know, whenever they feel like it's a good time for them. Something I consider right now is coming out is an experience where afterward I just feel really vulnerable or scared with how that person is going to, from that point on, treat me or interact with me. And I would say always, I am way more afraid and way more worrying about me being gay than they are. And so now I've gotten to the point where if it is really pertinent to the conversation, or for some reason it just makes sense, then I can do that. If someone's asking about my dating life, or, oh, you're going to go move over here and you're going to go find someone to marry, you're going to find your guy. And I'm like, yeah, probably not. And sometimes I could say, yeah, probably not. Like, I'm actually attracted to women, so it's not really a big goal for me right now. And I think you had even mentioned like testimony meeting or talk that like that would be inappropriate. And it's like, I think there's a lot of ways that it could be inappropriate. And I think there's a lot of ways that it actually could be
for sure
appropriate. It's not the focus. It's not the, hello, I'm going to share my coming out story. I'm sharing my testimony. And maybe part of that is
right.
I've seen the support of Christ and his understanding in trials of my life, or in things that I feel misunderstood about, and that could come up that way in a really appropriate kind of way with a focus on the Savior. But yeah, now it's really a decision where I felt like for a few years that it was something I needed to tell because it felt like a secret, and it just doesn't feel good to be keeping such a big like secret from some people that are so close to me in my life. So I kind of went through that phase of telling people who I felt like really should know these things about me. They know so much more about me, and that it's a key part of my life experience. And you can, when you talk about like, well, straight people, like they don't come out. It's like, well, they do come out if they're dating anybody and holding hands, if they talk about their spouse and kids, like that's them coming out. It just seems very normal. So it's a little different. And so it's assuming, and it's a correction, and it's hard to correct other people, correcting people's assumptions that you're straight, and now you're changing their understanding by correcting them that you're gay or coming out. And so it's not a moment of like, I'm telling you you're wrong, but it's really hard to do that as a person directly conflicting with someone's previous thought about you.
Yeah. And like you said, there are so many ways where it could be appropriate, like for a sacrament meeting setting, where I would love for, if a bishop is aware of somebody who has this desire to be more open about it, to say, hey, why don't we have you speak in sacrament meeting, kind of tell your story a little bit, to, work into some gospel principles. And this could be very uplifting and engaging talk that would bless. And
maybe it's right? A Fifth Sunday lesson. Yeah, like if it's going to be about like loving LGBT individuals, I would see that as a wonderful Fifth Sunday lesson or Relief Society or Elders Quorum lesson. But yeah, I think there are places and spaces for that. Yeah.
And I think we just have this habit that came from somewhere, even in I see it in the context of addicts, where as somebody may be addicted to a substance or pornography or whatever, and they go through the repentance process and, they're to a stable point, and that bishop or that leader may say, okay, let's just, this has been handled. Let's put it away and not address it again. But then those others that say, no, I want to tell my story. And the more they tell their story about their recovery, it connects with those other people that are struggling, right? And so again, not that I'm comparing this to an addiction, but I'm just saying in this in a similar context of you being open, that's going to connect to some people who are wrestling themselves or need a safe person to talk to, right? So it can be in the right scenarios, which is easy to do. It can be a huge blessing. So
yeah, everybody's struggling with something, and so it's just opening up the fact that we're human. I have experiences. I'm not as perfect as I look on the outside, and it really opens up for that real connection and the growth. And I think being vulnerable with friends allows them to be vulnerable back. And then we can support each other, as Bailey was saying, and have each other's backs.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this?
I'd say that everyone's path is different. Everyone's path is unique. And for some people, they might feel inspired to discuss this type of thing in a meeting or in a Fifth Sunday. And some don't feel comfortable coming out. But either way, as leaders of the church and as members of the Church of Jesus Christ, we need to love and we need to be welcoming. Our signs say visitors welcome. Everyone that walks in to the chapel needs to feel accepted and loved. And certainly there are prerequisites for things such as temple attendance and callings, but there's no prerequisite for walking in the front door and being part of that congregation. And so again, regardless of whether we choose to come out or not, we need to welcome everyone.
Love it. Perfect. Quinn, this is a point you brought up as far as sometimes you being single and same-sex attraction, it's easy to group you in with all the other singles. Like your experience must be just like the straight singles, right? What could we learn from that point that would help leaders?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, but I think there are big differences between a member of the church who is same-sex attracted and single and a similar member who is straight, a woman who is single. And a leader or a bishop might say, it's the same experience, right? Other people, there's other single women in the church and they're fine and you should be fine. But in my mind, it couldn't be more different. I have friends that are my age and aren't married and want to be married dearly. And they wake up every morning and they go out and they date and they wake up with this hope that it'll come to them one day. My experience is different because I get up every morning and I don't have that hope. I don't have that hope of finding someone to marry. And I've found happiness in my life, but for a lot of people that they could wake up with despair, quite the opposite of hope. And so it's important to remember that those two experiences are very different.
Yeah. And is there anything what's a leader to do with that as far as with how they interact, or is a certain way they communicate with them, or things that they just shouldn't say, or what's the application in that for leaders?
Well, I think to acknowledge that difference and to acknowledge that there's a reality that this person who might long to be with someone might never have that opportunity if they want to stay on this covenant path. And then secondly, to realize that there are still opportunities for joy and happiness in this life. And LGBT members of the church can and have found those paths of happiness.
Yeah. And sometimes it's easy to default to the position of like, well, the plan of salvation includes that marriage component. So, and if we just constantly lead that way rather than to the Savior way, right? That's maybe the slight difference that can really do more damage than good, right? Bailey, any thoughts your way?
Along the lines of like avoiding damage and saying things that are hurtful, I think it's great that anybody that's listening is listening and hearing our perspectives, but I would encourage them to keep learning and to keep, finding resources. There are tons of fantastic resources published by the church and even just scientific articles that can help you understand our perspective so that you are more aware and less likely to influence us in ways that would be damaging. Because I think even Jared and I, before we were married, we had this like hope that maybe my attractions would go away once we were married. Like that, I don't know, different people had suggested that might be a possibility, and that's just not the case. And so like understanding those types of things can be really helpful to not, like give us false hope or anything like that. Yeah.
And I've heard that even in the context of like making statements in the eternities that this is going to go away or fixing the eternity. Like we really just don't know or understand that. So you're better off just not even going there. Right. Mm-hmm. But as a leader, I remember just being in that state. I just want to offer you so much hope. Like, so let me put a sentence together and throw at you and be like, there's your hope. Hang on to it. In reality, that statement could be completely false. Right. So
stick with what you know. And what I know the most is that Christ is the one that can help us.
Yeah. And you mentioned this before you hit record, as far as like this concept of one of the best things a leader could do is just educate themselves, right? Learn. Mm-hmm. You mentioned articles. The church has articles, websites. North Star is a great resource for all these things. So just being proactive and learning, like even if they say everything wrong in the book, but that they're trying and they're actually looking into some of these things, like that's really all you need at the end of the day, right? I mean,
and it's nice if they can even just say like, actually, I haven't, had a lot of experience or learned much about this, but I want to help me understand your perspective, and being willing to listen to us is really reassuring.
Yeah. And this is a softball plug that I have to take with North Star, because, every year they put on this conference and there's a leadership session that's completely free to members of ward councils. And it's so awesome to see those rooms fill with leaders, but I'm always like, we're do this in Salt Lake. Like we should fill up arenas with these leaders, and it's so simple. Or I see I'll talk with people like, oh, you coming to North Star again this year? Like, oh, well, I went last year. Like I'm, maybe next year or whatever. I'm like if you like, this is really the only thing you need to do is just once a year, you go to this leadership session at North Star and you just educate yourself. And again, you're not going to come out an expert, or you're not going to know everything to say, but knowing that they have a bishop who goes to these leadership session is just trying to understand and learn, like that is so much of the work right there. Right. So you got to just get to these leadership sessions and really go to the entire conference. It's fantastic. And I go to the entire conference every year. And I always walk into rooms and breakouts where I think I have like no personal connection to this topic, but I'm just going to sit and sort of try and hear others' experiences. And it blesses my life so much. So get to the North Star conference. All right. We'll keep plugging that. But Deb, any thoughts that I don't want to skip over you at a distance? So
thanks. Yeah. The concept of eternity and the concept of hope, as you were saying, like we don't know what's going to happen and we don't need to pretend that we know, but there are a few things that we know. As Bailey said, the hope comes in Christ. And it's true that even though like, I don't know what's going to happen with my marital status throughout eternity, I know that God is good and that he loves me and that he has power and he has a plan. And I just do not feel doomed. I don't feel destined for sadness for eternity. And I know there's hope. And I don't know how it's going to all work out. And I don't have a plan in my head for how it should work out. But I just know that it's not a gospel of being doomed. And so when it comes to a bishop, something I appreciate as being a YSA age is not getting pressured to date men or not getting asked and pushed about that a whole bunch, especially if I've come out to them. Just an appreciation for where I'm at and the contributions I can make as a single member, that I think when we're talking about callings, YSA, gay YSA members contribute so much to the church, particularly to the youth and YSA and mid-single adult age. It's so having mid-single adults that are single and willing to serve and have time and energy and an enthusiasm. And it's amazing kind of what the contributions happen, particularly to the youth in the church through ISA. So I think bishops have some like secret trump cards of like, look at this, like we can pull in this person who's just really willing and excited and has the time and the talents and the willingness to contribute to a ward. So I think being seen for the gifts that we have instead of, oh, you don't have any hope, but it is so different. I would agree so much with Quinn that the difference of being single and straight in the church is you have this hope for maybe someday or eventually in eternity, or, oh, it's one of those 2000 stripling warriors, which we have no idea about their marital status either, but they all live. So I don't know, whatever, maybe they found people.
They all maybe grew old with grandkids, right?
I'm like, I don't know why we're all going after them, but okay. That there's just so much that we don't know. And so there are going to be other points for anchoring our testimonies other than dating when it comes to church.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned as far as the resource that, especially the YSA LGBT group is, I know when I go to the North Star conference, like, and I don't mean to generalize a certain demographic or anything, but you people are just a lot more fun. There's more energy there. There's hugs going around, and us boring straight people are, don't touch me. Like, let's just shake hands and we'll be good there. Right. So just being more involved in that community has really helped me grow personally. And so leverage that again, going back to this is a gift. Like, so why aren't you using it in your ward? It is a beautiful gift. Right. Awesome. Anything else on that topic before we move on? We're good. All right. You've touched on this a little bit, Bailey, but as far as this concept of talking to a bishop, and I think Deb, you had a perspective on this as far as like when an individual, whether there's a coming out scenario or not, or just talking with a bishop, like don't jump to assumptions as far as what they're saying. And I often hear it in the context of, maybe an individual comes into a bishop and says, I experience same-sex attraction or I'm gay. And that bishop assumes they've done something wrong. Like, oh, no, like, what did you do? Right. But Deb, you kind of talk about another scenario that don't assume they haven't done anything wrong either. Right.
Yeah. It felt weird writing it down, taking notes, but it's like, don't assume the best in people, which seems like counter. It's like, hear me out. The understanding of if I'm coming to a bishop saying, hey, I need help, or even if I don't say I need help, saying, can I meet with you and talk to you about this? It's probably because it's weighing me down, or I have something that's hard to deal with that, okay, I've finally gotten to the point that I can talk with my bishop. And if I come out to my bishop and then just instantly, I've had this happen with just other ward members or a bishop where then they just instantly start praising me of, oh, I'm so glad you're just not dating other women and that you're staying in the church and that you're not going down a different path. It's like, hold up. I haven't said actually what I am doing. And, and maybe I'm not doing those things that you're thinking of, but give me the space, allow me the space to talk. And particularly in the role of a bishop, where if there's someone that I'm supposed to talk to about spiritual development and progression or spiritual setbacks and trip ups, then to allow the space, it's so much harder. If 2 seconds ago he just said, thanks for being so perfect at this, that you're like, actually, I'm not perfect at that. That's way harder to get through and be able to express the truth. I was thinking it would be really nice if I had a bishop just ask me if I have a meeting with them, even if it's just like the annual get together and let's chat for 20 minutes meeting, to have them ask me, is there anything weighing on your heart spiritually, or what's been difficult for your spiritual progression? That they are spiritual leaders and they can ask, is there anything that's hard for you spiritually? Everybody has something hard for them spiritually. And so that opens up the door. And so what it is it's reaching out part way to allow the other person to reach back. And instead of me doing 100% of the coming out and, hey, can we meet? And can I tell you my hard things? And now I'm going to say this hard thing. If you meet with a bishop and they were to say, what's hard for you? It's so much easier to answer that versus just coming out with the thing that's hardest for you.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And I love that. And I think a lot of leaders, especially bishopric members, will hear that, be like, well, we ask them that question every 2 years during their temple recommend. Is there anything that would, hold you back from whatever the question is? But really, like, in the context where you are in a sincere conversation, one-to-one, and you're not just going down a list of questions, asking them, anything that's weighing on you, let's talk about it. Right. And that just opens a door of safety, like Bailey mentioned earlier, that's so helpful, of just letting that out. And it's sort of the, going back to when people assume that you are this perfect Latter-day Saint, that, yeah, you experience same-sex attraction, but haven't done anything wrong. It's sort of the phenomenon, like being a parent, when I go to my daughter and I raise her again and again, like, oh, you're such the perfect daughter. You're doing so good. Oh, you do so well. And like with all these affirmations that are so positive, that she then absorbs them, thinking, I can never let him know that I actually do make mistakes. Right. And so sure, we'll be encouraging and maybe we will make assumptions that, in the positive sometime, but never close the door of saying, like, but if you do mess up, you do know, like, that's not a problem. Like, that is actually the gospel, is actually repenting and going through this. And so I appreciate that perspective so much of not assuming that everything's just going great, or they haven't, quote unquote, acted upon these feelings. Right. So, all right. Bailey, do you have a thought? Yeah,
I just think it's really important to recognize that everybody has their own individual experience and to not stereotype, generalize, assume anything.
Right.
Because, I'm a different person than Quinn and a different person than Deb, and we have a similar experience, but we might see things a little differently.
Yeah.
And to really take the time to get to know that individual, ask them those questions so that you can.
Yeah. And, that truly is the risk of doing like an episode like this, because I want to speak to that to everybody out there. But at the end of the day, I can only have 3 of you here today. And these are 3 different experiences. And someone may disagree with some of the things you're saying, or some may say, well, I would do it a different way, but that's okay. Just approaching it. And especially it's helpful as a leader, knowing that even though you may have that sister and you'll walk in your office and share similar experiences, that doesn't mean that it's exactly like Bailey's experience or Quinn's experience, right? We just have to say, okay, this is an individual experience, but I have some background and some knowledge that maybe I can bring to the table, So awesome. I want to ask you maybe two more questions, but the second to last one is, Quinn, we'll start with you. As far as a lot of people, there's a lot of resources out there, a lot of groups, obviously it feels safe when we can go to a web page that's on the church's website and, okay, this is like approved. I won't get into trouble here, be led astray. But North Star, to me, as a third-party nonprofit organization that really does a phenomenal job with creating community around this concept, like, help leaders understand, like, for you, what has North Star, like, how has North Star helped you in your journey?
Right. Well, I think you mentioned the word community. And as human beings, we're always looking for community, whether it's community of friends or our family communities, our church, our extracurricular. And this experience is no different. In fact, oftentimes, perhaps there's more of a need for community because many of us have been so alone in our journey for so long. And so when we can finally understand and acknowledge what we're experiencing, I think that the first reaction is to go and find someone else who can relate. And to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and to experience same-sex attraction or to be gay is a unique and singular experience. And North Star is a place where we can come together and find individuals who are living similar experiences. And my experience with North Star has been fantastic. I've found people who I can relate to, who support me and who love me, regardless of what path I'm ultimately going to take, but especially supportive in my desire to be a covenant-keeping member of the Church of Jesus Christ. And there's also discreetness there. You don't need to be afraid that you're going to go and be exposed in a way that you don't want to. I think everyone's really sensitive in that community. And it's a loving and kind place to be and to find support in our journey.
Awesome. Bailey, what about you? How has North Star helped you in your journey?
It's been really good to realize that Jared and I aren't the only ones trying to make our marriage work with this same-sex attraction being part of it. The first conference we went to was actually the couples retreat in like a year and a half ago. And it was like, oh, like there's other couples and they are figuring it out too. And they have hope, and just seeing them gives me hope. So it's, the community is really huge and helpful. And it's just, there's a lot of love going around at North Star. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Deb, what about you? How's North Star helped you in your journey?
It's realizing that other people understand. I think as humans, we all crave feeling understood. And I think that's where Christ is the perfect example through the atonement, that he understands us perfectly. But in a situation like this, it's like this very small scale version of that kind of understanding of, this is a big thing in my life that really affects a lot of aspects. And in this room, there are other people that really understand that. And that's just really nice. And it's nice to be around other people that are maybe more confident than me, or at a time, and help me be more comfortable with myself. As I see them comfortable with themselves, then I can relax a little bit and realize like, I'm okay. And this is okay. And there's hope. As it's nice seeing people that are a few years farther out than me and how they've paved their path, and that it looks pretty good, like my life is not destined for sadness, that there's great opportunities and happiness to be had. And also being connected with people that are maybe a few years behind in the path and where they're at, and helping them and reaching back and just allowing for that connection, and giving them the reassurance like, hey, there's people who care about you, and you can share this if you would like. And there are people who would be very supportive and that aren't going to judge you, and that will try and support you where you're at. I think at North Star, there's a big just respect for other people's boundaries or their decisions, or just kind of where they're at, and it's okay. And I've seen a lot of acceptance through the people that I've met at North Star, and it's just nice to have kind of those friends in different areas too that understand and that are supportive.
Love that. Well, Deb, we'll stay with you with the last question, and this will be our last round robin question here. But how has you recognizing this gift of being same-sex attracted helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
I've had a lot more compassion and patience, and the understanding that people need to be reached out to. I think being gay has opened up my ability to minister to other people better, and to realize everybody just needs a friend or someone to reach out. And that has, whether they be gay or not, or whether they have lacking social skills, or if they're new to an area or whatever, or even if they're the Relief Society president, everybody needs a friend and some support. And it's just being able to listen and connect with people and help them where they're at and be with them where they're at, and just love people for who they are. So that's what I would say.
Bailey, how has your gift of being same-sex attracted helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
I just want to say ditto to what Deb said.
I'll just replay that again. Yeah. That was good.
Oh, it's just, I have developed more compassion and understanding and love for people, all people.
Great. Quinn?
I would also echo what Deb and Bailey have said. And I'd add that this has been an interesting life experience, to put it simply. It has been interesting for me. And at one point in time, I had to think about that scripture, men are that they might have joy, and wonder if it applied to me. Did that really apply to me? And after years of reconciling, I realized it did apply to me. And there is joy in this path. And I feel like the gospel is filled with paradoxes. We read things such as, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Take my yoke upon you and your burden shall be made light. Lose yourself to find yourself. And from a distance, these paradoxes seemingly contradict. But upon closer examination, we see that they don't. And sometimes it's easy for me to feel like I can't reconcile my attractions and my religion. But upon closer examination, I can. And I've had to adopt a very nuanced belief system to hold these seemingly contradicting ideas and pieces and parts at the same time. But I've found hope and I've found joy in that. And I've found that they're not incongruent. These pieces and parts of me are not incongruent or incompatible. And in fact, not only have I found hope in the gospel of Jesus Christ, but I've found happiness and hope not in spite of my attractions, but oftentimes because of them.
That concludes my interview with Quinn Kelly, Bailey Savage, and Deb Hutchins. Bless their hearts. I love them so much for coming and sharing with me. I learned a lot. I hope you did. This may be one that you could share with a bishop, with a Relief Society president, whoever comes to mind. That maybe you could drop a link in an email and send it their way. That it would be so valuable, and this is really how we help others, is by sharing, right? So share it, please. Again, I can't encourage you enough to go to northstarlds.org and check out the, of course, I'll put the link in the show notes, but check out the resource of the conference coming up and be at the leadership sessions. Even if you have to carpool and drive across Wyoming and get there in time for the conference, like this, it would be so worth that trip to be there and to be involved in the leadership sessions. So just go to the show notes, and there you can find the link to the North Star Conference, or northstarlds.org is the link as well to register and be there. You do need to register, even though the leadership sessions are for free, so we know how many are coming and whether to set up more chairs, right? That's what we do in our culture. But anyways, thank you. If there's any other topic or perspective around the LGBT community and the LGBT people out there, Latter-day Saints, what are we missing? What can we bring to you that would better help you understand and better help you enjoy your leadership experience ministering to these individuals? I know there's something. So go to leadingsaints.org/contact and let me know. And remember, text the word LEAD to 474747 and join the core leader community today.
It came as a result of the position of leadership which was imposed upon us by the God of heaven, who brought forth a restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the declaration was made concerning the only true and living church upon the face of the earth, we were immediately put in a position of loneliness, the loneliness of leadership, from which we cannot shrink nor run away, and to which we must face up with boldness and courage and ability.